Oh my goodness, it's another Because Cannabis show every single Wednesday, 4:20 p.m. on YouTube, Spotify, Thursdays. Welcome, everyone. I'm super excited to be back for another brand new episode, as we are every single week. My name is BC Wehman, that's Dustin Kava. You feeling it today, Dustin?
I'm cold today. It is a cold Eastern day.
I don't know when you're listening to this show right now, hopefully live Wednesdays, 4:20 p.m. on YouTube, or immediately when they drop 12:01 in the a.m. on Thursdays, full video on Spotify, anywhere you listen to audio podcast. But yes, at the time of recording this episode, this morning, Dustin, when I left the house, Uno. That was what the phone said on the temperature scale. I left at 7. I had a doctor's appointment at 7 in the morning, which sounded great when I had to take the children to school. And then now that I didn't, and it was Uno degrees. It was so cold that it wasn't cold. Does that make sense? It just was like still, like you just felt it. And as long as you didn't move, you kind of were just in this weird cold heat range. And as soon as you moved or the wind hit, the wind would go from like a, smiley face to like an immediate frowny face on that chart of 0 to 10. How are you feeling right now? Kind of moments.
You know what, Mike? The kids go to school in a pretty rural school out here. And these guys don't give a damn. There could be 2 feet of snow on the ground, and they're like, "Nah, buses are getting through it. Don't worry, kids can stand out." But this morning, the kids had off school because it was too cold, and that's when I knew. That's when I was like, if this guy's calling off school, I know it's bad. I better figure something out today.
I love it. All right, we're excited to be here with you once again for another show. I don't know. What do we should talk about today, Dustin? You got a whole thing going on here. I feel like you got a vibe. Dustin told me, he's like, I got a show idea. So we're going to run with it. Go. Take it away, Dustin Kava.
You know what? Me and you were having a conversation about concentrates 2 days ago, just a really brief conversation. And it instilled in me, just the sheer amount of concentrates types, or I don't even know what to call it, viscosity levels of shit in this industry. And I wanted to play a little game with you. I wanted to see if I got a bunch of things on the board here in a minute.
Okay.
I wanted to see how many of them you could guess the names of the type.
Okay. Yeah. It is something that is, I've taken, how ironic here. I feel like I wouldn't do well here. I've taken a deep dive as of recent into the concentrate game. So we'll see. But it's part of what makes it, and we'll talk about this. Ooh, look at that. I love it. If you're watching on YouTube right now or on video on Spotify, you can see the images that Dustin has pulled up on screen. If you're listening on audio, I'll do my best to describe them as well. But definitely check out the full video on YouTube, subscribe, get the notifications when brand new episodes come out. That's the best way to enjoy Dustin and I this week. And part of the issue, Dustin, is we look at all these different types on screen. There are 13 types on screen. Let me go through these in just a second. But part of the issue is this. It is that when I say cannabis concentrates, there's all these different types. Now, there are similarly as many different types of oil cartridge, the way the material can end up in the cartridge, but the end delivery system is exactly the same. It's an oil. You can have a 510, you can have a luster pod, you can have an all-in-one. The system works similarly. You can have cured flower, you can have live resin flower, you can have both of them. Process ends up in a very similar dispersion unit. With concentrates, when you say that term, you're like, oh, it's a concentrated form of THC, but then it becomes about consistency. It becomes about how you use to extract the cannabis material. Do you use a solvent or do you not? And then you take like a choose your own adventure. Once you take that first big step, solvent or no, then it's like step. Do you think that's, we talked a little bit the other day about how sales are a little low. And I'll take the quiz in a second here, but do you think that's part of the reason, or what's your vibe? Like, I'm not a concentrate consumer heavily. Part of it is it's a little intimidating. It's
intimidating. I think it's absolutely on the surface. Just looking at all these blank pictures right now, it is intimidating to think of and see all the different types of consistencies. I think once you find I'm more of a device first type of person. So I think about what is going to work best in the means of getting it in my body. So whether that is, I don't know, using an oil rig or a vape, or sprinkling on some flour, or ingesting it by cooking with it, or whatever. To me, it has always dictated the consistency in which I look out for. And so it's one of those amazing and yet fucked up things about cannabis, that there are this many different forms catering to you as an individual. But at the same point, if you don't know what you don't know, and you're not used to seeing it all in, say, Ohio, with the new adult use market about to jump off, that first viewing, that first showing of the concentrate portion of the industry, absolutely uh absolutely can be daunting. It can be really, really scary.
It is, and it's a lot. And then you add, Dustin, on top of this. And you're right. If you are new to this market, if you're just learning about cannabis, if you're excited and you watch some of the adult use issue 2 preview shows that we've had previously on here, when you think of, oh, I want to try these concentrates, first you have to get through, or maybe second, the consistency part. Then you have to get through all the other strains and profiles and all the other terpene aspects of it. So you have these multi decisions, and the third one is what you talked about. How do I actually consume it? Do I get my full on dab rig with my big nail and my butane torch? Do I do, what do they call them? The dab straws, like the little all in one thing kind
Yeah.
of, or do I get a electronic vaporizer? And as we have learned, if you get a electronic vaporizer that is both a dry herb and a concentrate, you better choose one. Because once you commit to wax or some sort of concentrate in that dry herb vaporizer, it's always going to be a concentrate vaporizer, because that shit stuff is going to get all gooked up in there. So once you do that, that's when you know you're going to have that issue. I mean, that's a lot of choices for people to decide.
It really is. And again, I guess this all boils back down to even what, Jim said, and Jim Belushi said in our last, a couple episodes ago, where, as much as I personally think that we are living in the most educated time for consumers, the reality is again, there is still a ton of people, that are entering into this industry, entering into usage now that it is more acceptable, and inquiring a bit more, that it's the bud tenders. A lot of this is now falling on the bud tenders to kind of convey this messaging across, to kind of weed through the weeds, in certain regards. And that's a hard thing, because there are a lot of steps before anything ever gets to a bud tender. And so I don't know, there's a lot of thought that goes into why we're going to choose this consistency or process in this way. And then the bud tender kind of just has this smorgasbord of shit they've got to go through and really truly understand to best hone in that usage case.
As
So it's
hard to do.
hard.
I would say that's tough. And I would say on the other side of that, like, you got a lot of time in the other piece, to me, that is essential. And that's the weird part. Most forms of cannabis, I mean, I guess you could say you need a bowl or paper to consume the flower, but a lot of cannabis these days is self-contained, right? You go buy an edible, you consume the edible. You don't need any other form, any other ancillary business to help you consume the product. But cannabis was built on the ancillary business, right? Like, you could you could get the dankest, stankiest weed from your bro down the street, but if you got nothing to put it in, right? You go into the smoke shop, you buy a little bowl. That's how it gets started, in your papers. And obviously, you can get them a lot of times in gas stations and stuff. Not, you can get them on the internet these days. But the concentrates really requires the smoke shop, the head shop industry to be a part of that, right? I'll get back to your quiz. I know we're going to take the quiz. Be sure, hang in there. We're going to take this quiz. We're coming right back to it in a second. But this is really interesting to think about. The other side of it is, you have this other folks. Did you find, when people would walk into the shop, when they're looking at a rig or some sort of gear to consume a concentrate product, that they already had concentrates and were familiar and were looking for their own? Or did people sometimes walk in and say, I've saw that concentrated cannabis in some weird form is available for sale. How do I smoke that, bro?
Uh, You know what? It's amazing how quickly it shifts from highly uneducated in the process to being an absolute pro. It happens, and actually in a very quick amount of time when it comes to device usage case. And so in the shop, you had, the shop was around well before adult use was out there, well before availability in Michigan was there. And so, at that point, it was more like, this is what I'm getting. This is what my dude has on a consistent basis. How do I switch my intake to using this material, whether that was wax or something else? It always started with that. Now that you have the choice, it's becoming a different conversation, and there are devices to be used that fucking hit them all, that you can literally do every single thing off of that one device. It may be complicated at first, but usage case, it will vaporize. It will absolutely get you all of what is in that material at a cleaner rate. But that doesn't, again, I'm not sure that the numbers would say otherwise now in the adult use market. It's a total different game from even 4 years ago.
It's interesting. All right, let's get to the education part here. Thank you for hanging with us. One piece though, it's interesting because it is, if you read sales and look at charts and statistics, it's somewhere, and it varies, somewhere between say 20 to 30, usually say 24%, give or take, of the market is this concentrate, right? And as we're about to learn, one of those, tinctures, really has its own place, and sublingual as a whole has its own market. But when you see concentrates, I think we typically think of some of the types we're going to talk about today, hashish, BHO, live resin, distillate, diamonds, all those other terms. We'll talk through all those terms here in just a minute, explain what they mean, show you some images of them as well. But it's just, it feels like a market that I don't know if it can expand if people don't start to take the time to educate, not on the product itself, but sometimes just literally on how to smoke it. I think that's the big learning curve, like how to consume it. And then the benefits of consuming, a lot of times they talk about the forms, but there's a whole different way of consumption and a way of physical and psychological reaction to your body, like how it hits you in that form, like what that concentrated is. And so once again, to your point, the benefits of maybe consuming it this way versus smoking a fatty, a hog leg, if you got them, if you got that, right, smoking those things versus consuming it this way, the immediacy of it, kind of those parts, and the amount of pain relief you could receive instantaneously, those things. So it's an interesting avenue. But do you think, this is my biggest question, do you think sometimes concentrate struggle because it looks the most like doing hardcore drugs?
Oh,
I gotta be
absolutely.
honest. Like, I gotta be honest. The
Especially at
first time you
first.
hit a rig and some dude's got a blowtane torch and you're touching it on there, and it's an amazing, there's not very many things I've tried to chase like that first dab. And so, but it feels very methy to me. Like, I hate to say that, but I'm just trying to keep it real. Like, I think that's an issue with it.
There are two problems. Actually, that is a main problem with the original usage of concentrates in general. Even, have you ever, even hot knives for your hash, heating up the knife on the fucking stove, hitting it on top underneath a cup type of shit, like a little fucking solo cup. There has always been a process that has been fucked up in terms of using your concentrates. But I do think that as much as I would hate to be a uninformed parent walking into your kid's bedroom and finding the torch and the dab rig and the nail and the tool and this fucking material that looks super scary and sometimes so dark that it looks like fucking something else, that it would be extremely frightening. But I also think that I saw the most amazing transformations with opiate addicts, ex-heroin users, when it came to switching over to cannabis and getting off the hard drugs, specifically because of how much of a routine it was in the process to smoke the concentrates, the wax, the oils. This idea that you have to, the same as what they're used to, fucking with spoons and heating shit up and fucking doing fucked up things. It was still a process that those endorphins, that release of reward receptors that are happening in the brain, go from happening after a drug is used to happening while the drug is being used to happening to prepping of the drug use to even happening to on your way to the fucking dealer to get your hard drug. And those receptors constantly are getting trained to fire earlier and earlier in a longer term addict. And so concentrates, it was such a heavy routine that it was like some of the most holy shit transformations I'd ever seen in the store came from the concentrate habit like that.
Yeah.
And so I don't know, there is something to it, but as a parent, as someone just walking into a room and seeing 4 dudes standing with a torch and a fucking piece of glass, I am like, I'm out of here. You guys are fucking nuts. This is not the place for me and not part of my comfortability. So I don't know. I see it from both ways, but I do think concentrates pose some of the most amazing usage cases that we've had in the industry in 50 years combined. You know, what we've done in 10 or 20 years is just outstanding for patients. And I don't see it going anywhere. There is becoming a higher ease of use. So there's something to this whole industry. And the numbers, I don't think are going to go down. They may be more convoluted, but I don't think they're ever going to decrease in the same way that flower's market share is going to decrease over the coming years.
I would say the only reason that it has potential to decrease is the rise of convenience-based products. And that exists in flower. You have your pre-rolls, which are up, by the way, to almost 14% of the marketplace nationwide. Probably it was 6 or 7% just a few years ago. It is a rising category. And so now, but here's where they combine, right? The rise, I just read an article, the biggest category projection for 2024, kids, mark it on your calendars, infused pre-rolls. So now you're looking at pre-rolls, but now you're looking at the different ways to produce the content through what we'll explain here in just a second. And then you're putting it back into the flower and just really multiverse Marvel level stuff happening there, all sorts of things. So
let's think. I want to ask one last question before I try to get you to guess some of this. What is your take on the usage of concentrates in an adult use market as opposed to the usage and viability of concentrates for medical users? So it's this idea of, is it it's the new 4-foot bong for the adult use because you're getting a much more potent hit in a much less amount of times to get the same thing. I'd smoke 2 joints, whereas I could take 1 fucking puff of my rig and have what I hit in a joint and a half. What's that balance there? Is it more patient focused, or is it, now designated to smack you on the ass real quick? And what?
Well, I think there's a couple layers. I think first and foremost, I believe concentrates sell and market better to adult use because it looks more like a fun kind of drug thing. And it is such an immediate, quick, and immense reaction. However, I think with very good marketing, you could sell it really well to the medical base because of the immediacy of the effects in the way that typically, and especially in some of the very high end stuff. And if it's, diamonds and such, you're getting immensely terpene based product full of, 15, 20%. I've seen at some of these places are you're getting like 8% myrcene and like beta carotene, and you're getting all these amazing terp profiles that also have healing elements. You're getting other things that people are doing, the infusion of daytime CBG, the infusion of nighttime CBN, adding different cannabinoids, CBD for anti-inflammatory, other effects. So it's not just, once again, the immediacy of, bro, smack that nail, let me get soups high. There is a massive amount of play with pure cannabinoids versus combustion of flower, which I love it, but it can't be great. We have to admit that. For that, yes, I think it fits better for medical, but it's such an easier sell to me in adult use. It just feels like those
really
numbers go for adult use because it's easier to sell. And once again, for a patient, I think if you really want to go, I'll take it one step further. You want to sell it to governing bodies. You want to sell cannabis as a medicine. And I'm walking aboard like all those folks did at issue 2. My best bet at selling cannabis as a medicine is putting out some capsules and a nebulizer.
Yes.
My not best bet is walking up there with a nail, lighting a blowtorch up, firing it up in front of, Huffman and DeWine and just, and then taking it in and go. That's not the sell for medical cannabis. Medical cannabis is, here's some capsules that make you feel better. So that's what's interesting. All right, let's pop it up. Let's pop it up.
Okay.
Let's talk some cannabis. Let's talk. You've been hanging with us. We're talking about cannabis concentrates and what they are in the marketplace. It's been a fascinating study that Dustin and I have been thinking about this industry for a bit. But even with all that, it can be confusing. So Dustin, if you're watching on YouTube, he has 13 images up on screen with us right now. They're different forms of concentrates. And I have a list here. So I do know the list of what they're supposed to be, because there's probably an endless list. I'm like, is that a flan or a creme? Like, I don't know what's the difference between a flan. I mean, it's cooking level terminology, and I still don't know the difference between a creme and a flan. And I've seen images, and they're like, it's like looking at one of those things. Like, do you see like one of those magazines and highlights where you have to find the images, but the illustrator decided to fuck with you that day and they didn't change anything? And you're like, see the difference? And I'm like, no. Do you see the difference between this creme and this flan? No. Like, they're like, this is slightly more airy. I'm like, okay. Like, I can see the difference between, we'll go top left. We know right now that is a tincture. By the way, official pronunciation of Tincture. How do you pronounce that word?
I always say tincture.
I know. I think that tincture is the correct pronunciation according to Google. I'm a tincture, which is 1,000% wrong. Don't say it like that.
It's even hard to say it for me. I can't like roll that C.
Sure. So tincture, but we should take tincture. And I got to be honest, if I'm going to have an tincture, I think by soon, and it probably has already happened for most folks, but we should talk through, tincture is becoming its own category, sublingual as a whole. It floats really between the concentrate and the edible world. And you're seeing more people do that. We'll talk what a tincture is. So tincture top left, across, we're doing the left to right top. So we're going, that is a tincture. It's a small bottle. Next to that is a slight bowl for powdery substance. Looking at my list of options here. That's got to be Kief.
That's Kief.
Right there. All right, next is kind of, oh man, see, now you're getting into the different oils and how it goes. Is that CO2? Is that BHO? Is that a wax or a distillate? I'm going to go, I'd save until I'm done here, but so I'm going Kief. I'm going to go CO2 oil for that one. I don't know if that's right. I'm not feeling great confidence in that. So next to it, we have a traditional kind of wax paper, a very amberish color. Looks pretty thick and solid. I'm going to go heat pressed rosin for that one. Middle left, far left. I don't really see that image well. I don't know what that is. I got to be honest.
It is 2 pieces of hot coil squeezing the extract out.
Oh, is that rosin then?
Mm-hmm.
No, all right. Well, shoot. All right. I'm taking my choice. I'm making that rosin, if that's what you're telling me that is. And then let's make, I'll take the other one as wax. We'll just take straight wax. It's paper. It looks simpler. The darker color's throwing me off a bit. So we'll go wax. Next to that, we have a little clip holding some beautiful stuff there. I'm going to go distillate for that one. Next to that, we have some, oh no. Yeah, we'll go distillate for that one. Next, we have some canister or like a typical 510 cart. But I'm going to guess maybe that's CO2 oil. Or no, I already guessed that. So BHO, butane hash oil, we'll put into that one. Next to this far right here, got a little kind of bulbous dark amber material sitting on the edge. That's not that. That's not that. Uh-oh. That's not that. We're going to put a pin in that one. I don't know what that one is right now. Well, let's go bottom left. That looks like butter for sure. I'm pretty confident in that one. I think next to that, we have a darker green. It looks crumbly, but I'm going not crumble. I'm saying that is our hashish, friend. One of my favorite words to say. Next to that, we have a glorious amber Jurassic Park-like color. It looks a bit like candy, rock candy. So Shatter is what I'm guessing for that one. Next to that, you have more of a darker kind of material pressed together. I was going to say sugar, but I don't see that. So I'm going to go crumble, which much like creme flan, if you put sugar and crumble next to me, there's a few nuances, but I ain't seen them. And then lastly, that bottom right, number 13, that has to be diamonds. That just looks like a bunch of diamonds falling out of the can. All right. So we were 13. There's a couple that are confusing. Tell me what I got here, and then let's walk through some of these subjects to help educate folks on what all those different types of concentrates that we just named. We're going to give a quick explanation of it. All right. So up left, we have tinctures. That was I correct on that one?
Yes, you had 8. Yes.
Okay. Kief.
Yep. You
All
had
right.
that one right.
All right. CO2 oil.
CO2 oil, you actually had right.
Okay. Yes, but I did not get the BHO oil right next to it. Okay, interesting. So we have both of those are solvents used to extract cannabis, and we have CO2, carbon dioxide, and BHO, butane, on there as well. And then we have rosin on the end, which immediately, as soon as you described the picture, because my bad eyeballs couldn't see it, I could see the rosin, which is, non-solvent used, heating the material out of it. Live resin. Did I get that one right?
You got that one wrong.
Oh, that is live resin next to it. I love that. We'll figure out what that is in a second. Distillate, I did not get that one correct.
You got that one wrong.
Wax,
too.
I didn't get correct because of the BHO oil clearly above it. But I think
you got butter right.
I did miss. Do you not have hashish on here?
I don't. I meant to put it in where the
That's where I got screwed up. So we got butter, the crumble, the shatter. I knew I got right. Shatter is anytime you look like something that looks like rock candy, you're in the shatter. Sugar. All right. Sugar, crumble. There's very big differences in that. Maybe I'll get educated. And then diamonds to finish it off. Glorious diamonds into there. All right. So those are some of the ones we're going to talk about today. Let's go through these one at a time real quick, Dustin. Just to kind of talk through the audience. We're not going to spend too much time. Dustin and I are not processing experts, right? We are two dudes who know a bunch of stuff about a bunch of stuff. So we're going to talk through kind of some basic explanations. We got a lot of great folks we did some research with, not only some of our great past guests on there. And by the way, we should just throw out right now, if you are looking to consume concentrates, Gibby Dowdy at Licit Glass. We'll put the address in the comments. That's your boy. So if you're looking to consume any of these, that's where I head to licitglass.com. You can find the website in the comments below. So Leafly, High Times, Cannabis Tech, Royal Queen Seeds, Cannabis Business Times, Cannabis Science and Technology, as well as Healthline and Extracts Labs. We did a lot of some information to put together. Thank you to all those folks with a lot of that research here. All right, Dustin, let me bring up our first topic that we are going to talk about today here. Let me bring this on screen. Say it with me because we all know how to say it now. Tincture. The tincture. All right. So the tincture are sublingual as a whole. So now we're looking at, these liquid extracts, right, is typically what you're going to say that those are. These are liquid extracts that are kind of, made overall when you're thinking of like steeping, almost like a tea, like steeping the cannabis into some form. And you can do this, by the way, from a flower or from a concentrate, and usually do it in a solvent. And I think the way that most people, would you agree with this? Usually some sort of alcohol is typically how you do it. Get some Everclear if you can, like put that stuff in there. Like you want, not rubbing alcohol, but like pure grain alcohol.
It definitely is typically used with either a glycerin or an alcohol. And I have personally, if you are making it yourself, I have mostly seen people make it with their alcohol as opposed to the glycerin. But medical, I mostly see glycerin.
It makes sense. And it's also, bottled vodka is much easier to run to than some glycerin there. So you're taking these, you're allowing them to sit for weeks, sometimes like weeks at a time, right? And just sitting there. And during that time, right, the alcohol or the glycerin is then, like extracting the cannabinoids, extracting all that stuff, just kind of really pulling it off, all the terps, right? It's all coming out into there. And so now what you have, and is a tincture as a whole, you have really, and a lot of times you see them right now is the vial that we're showing on screen there. We'll stop that screen share here. So a lot of times that's what you have for the most part, but as sublinguals as a whole, you're seeing more people get into things like breath sprays and stuff, things that you can put under the tongue, absorb it into there. So this type of method with tinctures, you're talking discretion times 1,000, right? So super discreet.
Yeah, no smell, no smoke.
Have fast onset, right? Because you're going straight into these glands in here. That's part of what
small amounts. You're not ingesting a whole drink or anything.
I was going to say Nate Zeke at Iblis was talking about, like the way it absorbs. This is one of the fastest areas, the throat and the mouth, to get straight into your bloodstream. So it has typically, because it comes in the dropper, it has a learning curve, I think, to dosing properly as a patient or as an adult use consumer. It has a learning curve, but once you figure it out, And by the way, it doesn't always have to be put it in a drink, put it in your coffee. I mean, it's a drop or two sometimes, depending on the bottle, 3 drops. It's almost unnoticeable in any form of beverage that you are consuming, including like a bottle of water, but you're going to get that same effect. And there's other things right now we're looking at, and this kind of goes similar to those, like they're big now, like the Mio type areas, the sport drinking things that the squirters that they're
Yes.
putting into. That's essentially sublingual. They float between edible and sublingual. The tincture does, or between edible and concentrate.
Yeah, it's also, I think this is like the easiest barrier to entry for newcomers or for parents who, you know, are experimenting with helping their children with
And
it.
those resistant, like some older folks who may be more resistant, because this is simple. It has immediate and an immediacy to its an effect, and it feels clean and healthy. It feels very clean and healthy to put a couple droplets or to take a squirt of a breath spray and just put it in and be like, oh, or put a little strip that dissolves into your mouth. Those are all I would put in similar categories and say, I'm done. And I'm medicated in 15 minutes, a small dose. Yes.
Yeah,
Especially CBD
it's
heavy dose, stuff like that.
exactly. That discretionary bit of it is huge. That ability that even if someone was to see you, used to be this hand motion, whether you saw anything in it or not, you knew the guy was fucking smoking. At least now, a couple drops under the tongue, you don't know whether it's a fucking pixie stick or a whatever the hell, you know, like you just,
I would
it's
know it if
much
it's a
more
pixie stick.
Yeah,
I would
that's true.
absolutely know if you had a pixie
That's
stick.
a pixie stick.
By the way, there
Um,
are infused pixie sticks.
So
So
then, yeah, so that's it's an absolute vital portion of the industry. Where do you think the tincture lies with, say, the capsule? You know, is it just the
it's
same?
interesting because capsules, I would put capsules in tincture closer in category than most people would. Capsules always end up in the edible category, but I think you almost need like this super medical category that covers things like capsules and nebulizers and probably tinctures. Where do you put a nebulizer? Like it's got its own category, so it's an inhalant. Well, now
It's
you have
certainly a
inhalant.
concentrate, though. I mean,
But
right?
it's an inhalant to me. It's not a concentrate because concentrate, and you don't want it. If you are, here's the other part. If you're in the tincture business, if you're in the sublingual business, I don't think you want concentrate associated with your product
That's
brand
true.
because
Yeah.
it makes it, people hear that. And if they're already thinking, oh, that's either confusing or I don't know. I've been speaking to a lot of patients lately, and a lot of them, well, I'm like, how do you consume flower, edibles? Couple, I've had a concentrate. 1 or 2 people are like, "Bro, I'm concentrate all day, every day." That number is very tiny, and I've had a very, very small sample size, but that number of "That's all I rock," it's tiny. It's a
Well,
weekend
is it? I
warrior
mean, how
invest
many
for
of
most.
is it but that's your vape pens too are part of that concentrate. That distillate
But
is in the
they have put themselves in a whole category though. Like you notice that. Like when you think of a vape cart, I know there's distillate, and we'll explain those terms here in a second. We should move on to the next one. But I think part of it is, I think they're trying to get away from that word concentrate. And I know it is a concentrated form, but I think that's why the words like distillate and stuff exist. All right, so tincture is on top left. What's our next one, Dustin?
Kief. So thinking about Kief, Kief is like that one that to me was originally that first concentrate. That's the, you know, going in, we don't have hash up here, but going into thinking about hash, it all started with the Kief, you know, it basically is the trichomes. When you ground your shit, you always had the screen in the bottom of your grinder to catch the Kief. It was the crystals that was on the inside of your plastic bag that you were so frustrated that they were there that you could never get to. You know, one of the reasons why we started sticking shit in jars, and that was to stop the breakage and the loss of the Kief, the trichomes falling off the plant. So yeah, I definitely think that it's an important aspect because it's the basis of making your hash. It's the basis of what we consider those original concentrates.
Yeah, let's bring a picture up here on screen here. You're taking a look at it. So, yeah, it is this ball of ground up trichomes. It is something that occasionally is sold. I think most often when I see Kief, I think, is that what you'd say moon rocks would typically be consist of when people sell moon rocks? Is that what they're
Moon rocks
selling
is
those?
actually a combination of about 4 different things
Okay.
usually. So first you have your flower as your base. So you want to take the nug. Then you usually want to coat it with a very very viscous
Oh,
oil.
yes.
So unlike a crumble or a sugar or something like that, you want it to be very, very like almost wet and glue-like to
Yes.
paint the bud.
Like you're making a popcorn ball,
Yes,
right?
like you're making a popcorn ball. And then the
Oh,
Kief is what they basically coat over
yeah.
that to allow a more easier to maintain or use consistency on the hands and fingers. So Kief, as great as it is and as flavor can come from it, in that a lot of its use in concentrates is as either the base or to allow you to touch it in the first place. So
Pre-rolls, they make pre-rolls rolled in Kief like that. Once again, yeah, you might have a collection on the bottom of your grinder. You may eventually just dump it into a bowl at some point or another. It is kind of the trichomes that are shaken off of there, but it is hard to like smoke Kief. You can't just put it in a bowl and smoke it. It's very like gone very quickly. So it works best kind of as that type of overall aspect of it. So Kief is there. Kief is kind of the very shaky trichomes at the bottom. Not typically something you purchase, but going to see moving forward the aspects we talked about a lot. Rolled onto joints, rolled onto flour, like find creative ways to use that. And then a lot of consumers kind of keep Kief at the end. All right, we got a couple of oils here, Dustin, coming up. The next two pictures you had up there, we had the CO2 oil and the BHO oil. So let's talk through these real quick here. I will. So CO2 oil, butane hash oil, right? Sounds similar, similar in sense. So CO2, carbon dioxide oil, using supercritical CO2 as your solvent. You are extracting the cannabis product, and it usually results, high pressure is what you're trying to do at high pressure, low temperatures, to really find. And this is where, if you have a secret sauce in cannabis, right? It's not the fact that you can make, if you can make a BHO or you can make a carbon dioxide oil, it's more about how the process is, right? Like that process.
well, and what do you, when you hear
That
high
they're doing.
pressure, what does that envision? I mean, like these extraction methods take a large container of flour, they stuff it full of flour. And when you put in that solvent, the solvent wants to expand. It's kind of like a compressed can of air. You are pushing it into that basin. And as that solvent expands, it's squeezing out every residual oil from the plant matter. And so, yes, they're very similar in the fact that you either use the carbon dioxide or you use butane, which is the BHO, butane honey oil. But it's the same concept. It's that idea of intense pressure caused by the expansion of that solvent and how much you're pumping in and pushing into that area, which is just, it's hard to imagine that sometimes, of like the gas physically squeezing the plant matter, taking out every bit of it.
And so you have these, and this is where, like, in the other aspect, similar to CO2 oil, would be BHO oil. Oh my gosh, easy for me to say. BHO, butane hash oil. So now, you're taking a potent concentrate using butane, right, instead of carbon dioxide. Similar processes, right? And now you get a lot of people that like a lot of colder temperatures help with this. There's a lot of science and engineering that goes behind it that people better than I and Dustin could talk through. But using these two types of methods, right? Using CO2, using butane hash oil, using BHO, using these, playing with temperatures, playing with pressures, you're going to then get the resulting consistencies that we'll talk about in a second, like shatter and wax and butter and crumble, that people have their preferences. It's the recipe of oil or solvent, the recipe of temperature, add in a dash of pressure, time, other types of maybe oils, play with that in those combinations using these type of machineries, which are both simple and dangerous if you're doing it on your own,
Yeah.
nice and regulated with this beautiful machineries that these places are doing. We're talking $1 million equipment, but you're making, then playing with that, using the strains, you're creating all these different crazy stuff we'll talk about here in a second, like shatter, wax, butter, and crumble, right? That's a pretty easier way, I think, to run
exactly. To me, it's the secondary base of the concentrate industry. You had first the Kief to be pushed into hash, bubble hash and such. And then you had essentially now adding additional things besides, say, ice or water to help extract that stuff. You were now applying solvents, and from those solvents, from that process, we get a lot of what we have going on now, which is all these different other consistencies. So rosin, we talked about like this idea of rosin is an additional thing. It's actually doing a lot of the same processes with heat and pressure, only without any solvents, period. So you're purely using heat and squeezing of something to push out everything that's inside the plant. And that also, you know, there's, yeah, that's just that both fuck. I mean, this is just so goddamn complicated when you think about how they get 13 different types of consistencies.
Yeah, well, I think a big part of it is when you think rosin, so you have this solvent versus solventless. And so when I think rosin, think I'm not using any form of other chemicals or other processes. I am using heat and pressure strictly, primarily, right? And so now, once again, I can take rosin and then I can use this to do a lot of different other things, like roll it around on flour and roll it on pre-rolls, consume it naturally. Rosin itself can be more waxier or more shatterier. It can be stickier, right? You have some variables that come from the color of it changes. I know that I've seen CBD pressed and it's very dark and ambery, is where THC typically you want a more lighter, like the picture on screen here, if you're watching on YouTube or Spotify with video, is a little bit more lighter amber, right? You want amber, you want that like clearness. And then some people are getting to like crazy clear diamonds and stuff, stripping out that stuff to be the purest of the pure. So when you think rosin, and that brings us to our next term in a second, which is the resin, the resin battle. So rosin, heat applied to the plant material. Now the plant
with
material,
solvents.
No solvent. Now the plant material, here's where it gets super tricky. The plant material could be cured plant material, but it could also be live resin. So in theory, you could make live resin rosin. And how do we make live resin rosin, Dustin Kava? We make live resin rosin by pressing fresh flash frozen plant. So live resin, when you hear that term live resin, and live resin can be applied basically to almost any form of extraction these days. It is taking the plant immediately upon harvest, putting it into these crazy deep freeze cryogenic machines that are freezing these fully engorged terpene filled cannabis nodules at that moment. And so it has no degradation. In theory, extremely little time outside of any other elements besides its ideal grow condition, typically straight from there to the freezer. No extra sunlight, no extra, chemicals, no other humans playing with it. Just boom, flash frozen. Then that flower is then used to make any, in a CO2, in a BHO, or you have cured, which is the plant has been cut, that plant has been dried through whatever cure process people are using, and then it's then done all these things too, right? So when you hear cured, you're having plant that's been cut and dried. Live resin typically is plant that's been fresh frozen, and then all these other aspects happen. Is that a pretty fair kind of estimation?
I think the only thing I would like to maybe clear up is that both your rosins and your live resins can both come from using flash frozen material. Essentially, it is the addition of CO2 to the process that helps make the live resin, as opposed to the rosin having zero solvents and just using heat and pressure. They both can start with the same flash frozen material or non-flash frozen or cured frozen material to squeeze out this stuff, but it's that additional aspect of the CO2 which makes the live resin. And again, we're getting into these dynamics and these very specific things that, as a new user to this industry, my mind would be like, what the hell? Why did they do it? What dick in the back room said, I'm going to do this differently, and this is why? And why are they sticking to it? What is it about the industry where we're forced to kind of make these make these stand out in such a way? And there are particular usage cases, again, why you would want to do either or when, and there's belief systems involved, but man, is this confusing.
It does get to be a lot. And so it's just one example of why we kind of keep talking through this, why we wanted to kind of educate you a little bit on concentrates. There's a lot of other great videos here, but just talking through the different forms on here. Once again, check out our Alex Sandorf interview from Lighthouse Science. That dude really was down. We've had a couple other great people talking about it. All right, let's bring up our next term, Dustin. I hear this term all the time, and this term is, let me bring, I guess, a picture up here on screen, make it a little bigger there. I hear this term all the time, and it's one that is used not just in THC. You see it even in your Delta 8. You see it in there. This term shows up all over in the cannabis world, and I don't know if I'm still working on this one. Distillate, Dustin, break it down for me. No.
It's a lot of it has to do with heating things up to almost like their boiling points and extracting in a lot of ways them separately. So it's this idea of you're still refining that oil or that THC CBD, but yeah. And this one, again, this is kind of like now become the dirty word of vape cartridges.
It is a dirty word. Why is it a dirty word?
I think when you hear it doesn't necessarily distinguish the process. So again, when you are pushing CO2 or butane into this plant matter, you want to make sure that you extract every ounce, especially the butane, every ounce of what you pushed in, you want to come out of that chamber. You want to know there's absolutely zero butane left in something you're going to say give to a patient and whatnot. When it comes to the distillate, it's a dirty word because it reminds me more of a recipe-based extraction. There's a lot more things where, because they isolate stuff in certain ways, they don't always add it back in the same exact way that they've isolated it. Meaning that,
yes,
like they're going to add extra terpenes or maybe some other flavorings so that it tastes like strawberries instead of strawberry weed, which it doesn't really taste like strawberries.
Yeah, so I think that is your point. The dirty word to me is because people are using it, and some people are doing it amazingly. In fact, I think Alex talks about how he's able to do that and then have these kind of vials of pureness and put them back together. But what's happened is people are extracting the THC, right? And they're sometimes not giving you any other, say, natural parts of the plant, no other kind of, and this happens a lot in CBD in this area, no other parts of it. And then they're just giving you basically artificial flavorings to taste it. So you're still getting THC or CBD, but there is a lot of, as we grow and educate with the plant, part of the plant that makes it unique is the terpene profile with the flavonoid profile, with the cannabinoid profile, and how it affects the body. So you're getting a much fuller experience from the plant. And so why maybe sometimes if you get a very distillate product, the pureness of the THC could hit you very differently than the wholeness of a fully covered plant, right? So I think that's a big part of it for that area. I think that's a big reason why it could be a little bit in there.
This is what also provided some of the black market to be able to start using cutting agents to make it go further, which also ended up being a lot more dangerous. So it's this idea of, because you're already adding stuff to whatever formula you want, whatever ratios you want, now it's this idea that, because what's the difference between adding some other cutting agent and making it a little bit thinner and easier to smoke, or making you fill more cartridges so you make more fucking money? And so there has been more play and manipulation in this portion of the concentrate market that now I think we're moving away from it in certain ways because of that lack of trust, even though the vast majority of processors are extremely, vetted in terms of them making their distillate. Yeah.
All right, let's bring up the big picture now. Put all the images back up. Let's talk through this last row here. So we have wax, butter, crumble, shatter, sugar, diamonds. To me, all of those are essentially the same, right? So what we talked through a lot, and we didn't actually mention like hashish, which is kind of taking like Kief and like pressing that as well and making like these brick type things, right? And just once it actually makes Kief a little bit more able to consume, like in that world, you're taking all the fine parts of it, then you're pressing it down into a brick like area that is able to be smoked a little bit better than just the loose Kief. So tinctures, that is this, form of induction, consumption. Kief is obviously the rollover part of it. BHO oil, CO2 oil, different types of oils that you can use in a solvent type extraction. Rosin is solventless, live resin versus distillate. Now we're taking and extracting the parts of it, or we're taking the flash frozen and getting the full presence. So all those are different types to ultimately get to the other set of categories. So this
I
is why
know.
concentrate's so hard. We just got to understand how you get there. And these are just the end results. The other parts are all used to make the shit we're about to talk about, which is wax, butter, crumble, shatter, sugar, diamond. So let's leave this up here. Let's just talk through these all at once. We'll start with wax and then we'll go through, so wax to me, once again, same process. I think wax is very whippy. I think that's like kind of do it right. So they take the plant, they take it CO2, they take it BHO, however they're kind of getting the plant to where it's at, kind of give it really this kind of whippiness, this agitation during that process, and kind of, I think don't they like vacuum, like suck out
Yes,
kind
they
of
have to
some of the
purge
salt.
it.
So they
Yes,
pull out the solvents, whip it up, and it makes that, and it's very gooey, very sticky, waxy, as the name implies, kind of substance.
it's hard to not manipulate. It's hard to maneuver. So it's one of those things where that consistency to start with is a little bit more difficult to say put into a device than a lot of these others. And I think that's in a lot of cases why a lot of these other forms ended up becoming prominent in the industry. It's that wax is just fucking a nuisance to use in a lot of ways. Everything gets dirty. Everything gets sticky. If you get it on your shit, you can't ever get it off. It gets on your tables. It gets on your, it is a very difficult thing. Whereas
I think it was one of the first ones. I believe wax.
And that's exactly it. And it was because
early.
It's one of the easiest ones. These in the back of your shed BHO operations, they would literally take a glass chamber, fill it with their product, their flour, squirt a bottle of butane in it. And when it hit a certain pressure, you would see that waxy material come out the glass chamber, small nozzle or screen at the bottom. And then that purging process was as simple as leaving it on a table in certain regards and watching the butane bubbles pop up to the top of it and evaporate into the air. As they pop out of the material, butane's evaporating in your house, in your lungs, in your shit. And it was a very nuanced thing of how do we get all that butane out? Now they're measuring it. They measure it when it goes in the chamber, and when they suck it out, they measure it to see exactly the same amounts came out as came in. But it's difficult to use. Whereas, you start thinking about crumble, you can touch that crumble and it not stick to your hands. You can snap that shatter and usually hold it for a little while. It's almost like a M&M, like it doesn't melt in your hand, but it in your mouth, it will, type of shit.
Yeah.
And the same thing like the butter. Yeah.
So you have butter then. So butter is the same process as wax.
That's with the whipping. That's where there's the heavy whipping.
Evo, whip it real good. Extra whipping, puts more air into it. Once again, we're doing a very simplistic explanation. I don't know. Maybe we're brilliant. Let us know in the comments below. Take the wax, whip it a little more, give it some extra agitation, give it a little more air into the system, gets a little creamier. Boom, you get more of a butter. Aptly named, looks like butter. Definitely a little bit easier to use than wax, but it is less sticky. The whippiness of it gives it a more light texture that doesn't get up all in your shit. It really
likes to gather in on itself. It likes to, like you see that tool where they have that thing, that chunk. It's a lot easier to get that chunk. It's a lot less messy. It's just like you're scooping a thing of peanut butter on a knife.
So for that, next you got up crumble. So now crumble, you're taking a look at lowering the temperature and lengthening the time that you are kind of purging back out the solvents. And so that creates this drier consistency. It's dry, powdery, kind of depends. Once again, there's a lot of nuances, and we're not even talking what the strain of the flour does to this. But so crumble is, light, very powdery. And then its opposite side of that would be, as we talked about, shatter. Now you're talking, very translucent, very glass-like, like rock candy, I think is what most people say. Correct me if I'm wrong, Dustin, but is shatter like I've heard shatter can be produce some of the most purest forms of the plant and one of the most purest experiences?
Certainly in terms of, yes. And again, a lot of these different things, like the way they vaporize, when you put it into a hot nail or you put it into an oven chamber that's heating it up to essentially vaporize this. That's what's cool about the concentrates is because there's no leaf matter, there's very little combustion to get this into you. You're actually vaping it. You're warming it up to say 250 degrees or 270 degrees or more, and it essentially vaporizes. The crumble is kind of neat though, where it's something you could sprinkle on stuff. It has high usage with flour as a duo team, a lot more easier usage than putting on the wax.
What's the difference between crumble and sugar?
Crumble and sugar is actually, the sugar is a little bit more wet. There's more additions of terpenes. There's more
wet crumble.
It's a wetter crumble. So it's kind of like, it's exactly that. It's as if you took sugar and water, dumped a couple drops of water on a teaspoon of sugar. That's that type of consistency. It's enough to stick to itself, but it breaks apart into smaller, almost chunks. But yes, the Shatter, I have known an easier time getting it in me, a way better flavor, and way easier to handle. It's to me a gold standard when it comes to ease of use, which then makes me want to use it the most out of a lot of these.
Which leaves our number 13 on the list, the very clearly noticeable diamond. So now diamonds are a little different, and I would say probably diamonds are like class 201. Like, get through some of these other concentrates before you get to there. So now diamonds are, so you have this like crystalline formation of THCA, right? The acid, the THCA that forms, right? Which, and then THCA,
it's like 99% crystallization of that THC. It is the highest extract of the THC. You can't get any filler. You can't put any more. It is pure THC.
Yeah, and so they look like little small diamonds. And I've even seen other companies go like to Glaciers, which are like the brand, like the best of the diamonds. And so literally companies have to sit there and these kind of processes evolve. It's a very labor and time sensitive process.
And it's almost like you're growing them. It's a really weird thing where inside what you're using to make it, like, you will over time see them get larger and larger and larger. It's like those science experiments that your kids had with the sponge where you dropped it in the water and all of a sudden it grew bigger. That's what it reminds me of. It's like it forms like a cave rock or a crystal would, in that case. But it's 100% THC, which means there's no other room with that process for terpenes, for anything else. It is just unflavored, unadulterated THC in its most highest potent form.
Yeah, but you got a lot of companies that are then infusing back. Like, I think this is what Alex talks about during our interview with him, Alex Sandor from Lighthouse Science, infusing the terpenes back. So now you're having terpene sauce infused diamonds and or Glaciers, the biggest one.
Color.
And now you're like, and there can be crystal white, and you are like, this is, once again, consume one of these other concentrates, get used to the process, however it is, before you head that route. So we covered a lot of stuff today, Dustin, man. That was like a ton of stuff, just kind of walking through and talking about today, going through this process here. Concentrates galore conversations here on Because Cannabis. What did you guys think listening to the show? Did you like it? Did you find this informative, talking through the process of concentrates? I hope so. Check out, let us know in the comments below. Let us know what other subjects you'd like Dustin and I to kind of talk through and go through, everyone. That's it for this week's show. Give us a subscription, give us a like, give us all of those good things, everyone. Dustin, as always, thanks, man. That was a super informative show. Loved it. We'll talk to you later.
See you later, brother.